It starts subtly, a flicker, a pause that wasn't supposed to be there. Not in the world, but in your mind's rhythm, a beat skipped in perception, a hesitation between one moment and the next. You're sitting in a room you've known for years. The chair creaks the same way. The clock ticks like always, but suddenly, something about the way the shadows fall feels off. Not wrong, not broken, just not how they're supposed to be. You rub your eyes, nothing changes. You check your phone, the time makes sense. Your texts are normal. Reality hasn't shifted, but you have, because for the first time, you're aware of the space around you in a way that feels invasive, as if the room is watching you back, not with eyes, but with presence. You try to distract yourself, scroll, call someone, put on music, but even the voices in the song sound strained, too sharp, like they were recorded inside your own skull. You begin to wonder, did something happen to you? Did you sleep wrong? Eat something strange? Is this a panic attack? But you're not panicking. Your heart is calm, your breath is steady, and that is what unnerves you most, because fear without a clear cause feels like being hunted by something you can't see. You go to the mirror, check your face, your eyes, everything is where it should be. And yet, when you blink, for just one frame, your reflection doesn't. You freeze. You stare longer. Nothing changes. It behaves now, as if it was waiting for you to notice it the first time before slipping back into place. You laugh it off. Nerves, fatigue, you didn't sleep well. That's all. But the seed is planted. That night, your dreams don't make sense. There's no narrative, just images, a hallway with no end, a face made of static, a ticking sound that gets louder and louder until it becomes a hum inside your chest. When you wake up, you're not sure if you ever really slept, and the room looks different, not physically, but emotionally. The air is heavier. The silence feels staged, as if the world is holding its breath. You walk into the kitchen, and for a second, you're convinced the fridge door is slightly open. You swear you saw it move. You stare at it. It doesn't move again. You touch it. It's shut. Your hand lingers. And in that stillness, you feel a pressure behind your eyes, a sensation like something is crouched just behind your field of vision. If you turn too fast, it'll vanish. If you move too slow, it'll creep closer. You don't turn. You go back to the living room. You turn on the TV. But the actors' mouths don't sync with their words. You try another channel. Same thing. You check your internet. It's fine. You're not, but everything else is. You sit still for a long time. You try to meditate, to breathe, but the silence begins to change shape. There's a sound now, not a noise, a pattern, faint scratching, like nails on wood, somewhere in the walls, or behind them. You press your ear to the plaster. Nothing. You wait, and just as you start to pull away, if you hear it again, a whisper, one word, indistinct, like someone trying to say your name, through fabric soaked in water. You stagger back. You tell yourself, I'm hearing things. You laugh. You even say it out loud. I'm hearing things, that's all. But now you've admitted it. And it won't stop, because the hallucination hasn't arrived yet. But the cracks in reality have, and once they start spreading, they don't stop. It didn't start with a scream. It didn't even start with fear. It started with stillness, an absolute stillness so heavy, it made the air feel like liquid. You woke up that morning convinced you were being watched. Not in the paranoid, anxious way, but in the way you feel when you're on stage and hundreds of eyes are silently locked onto you. Except this time, there was no one there. Just walls. And that new feeling that the walls weren't passive anymore. They were participating. You remember the corner of the room first. That's where it began. The corner where the ceiling meets the wall, the kind of space the eye never pays attention to. You weren't even looking at it directly. You were tying your shoes. And then something flickered in your peripheral vision. It wasn't a flash of light. It wasn't movement. It was a breath. That's the only word your brain could attach to it. Like the corner inhaled. A slow, gentle rise of the wall surface, as if it swelled outward for the briefest second. And then, flat again. You froze. You stared at it. It was motionless now, but your chest was tight. Your hands were damp. Something inside you whispered, "This is the moment everything changes." You didn't scream. You didn't call for help. Because how do you explain to someone that your wall breathed? You stood there for hours, watching it, waiting, doubting yourself. But the doubt didn't last long, because it happened again. Not just in the corner this time, across the room, near the window, where the wallpaper lifted ever so slightly, not from heat, not from wind, but like muscle flexing beneath skin. A rhythm, a pulse. You started counting the intervals. Every 11 minutes, something moved. You wrote it down, kept notes, because your mind demanded logic. It begged for order. If you could track it, you could control it. If you could name it, it would stop. But it didn't stop. Instead, the patterns got more complex. Now, the humming returned. Now, the whispers weren't words, they were conversations. Faint, fragmented, as if two people were speaking right behind the drywall. And sometimes, they said your name. You put your head against the wall again, not because you wanted to, because you had to. It wasn't curiosity. It was compulsion. Something deep in your brain demanded confirmation. And the moment your ear touched the surface, you heard it. Breathing, not yours, not the wind, but from inside the wall, measured, calm, close. You pulled away instantly, but your skin burned. The wall was warm. This is the moment you crossed over. This is the day you stopped asking if you were hallucinating and started asking how much of reality had always been fake, because everything still looked the same. The room, the colors, the sounds, but there was a delay, a microsecond of lag, as if the world was buffering. You stared at your reflection in a spoon and watched it blink before you did. You poured coffee, but the smell hit your nose half a second before it actually poured. Your senses were no longer in sync. Your mind was outpacing time, or time was rejecting you. And that's when you saw it again. Not in the wall, not in the corner, but in the middle of the room, a ripple in the air, a distortion like heat waves, except there was no heat, just presence. Something standing in the room that didn't want to be seen. Something that knew how to bend light, knew how to breathe without lungs, knew how to watch without eyes. You didn't move. Neither did it. But then, and it did, it tilted its head. You collapsed. Whether from shock, seizure, or your mind reaching its limit, you'll never know. When you woke up, you weren't scared. You were quiet. Because when the wall breathes, when the air watches, when the unreal becomes subtly, undeniably real, you no longer fear insanity. You fear understanding. Because if what you saw is real, then everything you've believed isn't. You thought it would stop once you named it. You thought saying hallucination out loud would act like a spell, sealing it away. But nothing changed. If anything, speaking, it made it stronger. Because now it had permission. You learned something that day. It doesn't matter whether what you see is real or not. What matters is if your brain accepts it. And yours did. It accepted the wall's breath, the whispers behind paint, the ripple in the air, and most of all, The thing that tilted its head at you. You never saw its full form, but you saw the outline, not in your room, in your memory, like something had been edited in, retroactively inserted into your past. You looked at childhood photos and felt sick because you noticed a blur in the background, the same spot in multiple images, a distortion where the light never seemed right. You remembered birthdays, suddenly haunted by the feeling that someone else was always just out of frame. You felt followed by your own life. The more you acknowledged it, the more it changed. At first, it only breathed. Then it started to copy you. You'd lift your hand and feel a second echo of the gesture, half a second later, like your shadow was becoming real. One night, you laughed at a movie, and a second laugh echoed from the hallway. You live alone. That's when you realized it had learned mimicry, but not just sounds, thoughts. It began finishing your sentences. In your head, you'd start a thought, and another voice would end it. Not hostile, just there, like a passenger, like a roommate you never invited in. You stopped trusting your own inner monologue because it no longer felt like yours. It was shared. You stopped sleeping, not because you couldn't, because you were afraid of what might be in your dreams now. You were no longer sure where the hallucinations ended, and the dreaming began. One night you blinked, and your room changed. Everything was the same, but wrong. The walls were slightly too tall, the shadows moved on their own, and there was a mirror where no mirror had ever been. In it, you saw your room, but you weren't in it. Something else was. Standing in your place, same height, same outline, but no eyes. Just black, endless pits, where awareness should have been, and it was smiling. You closed your eyes, begging yourself to wake up. You felt your heart race, your skin crawl, but you didn't scream, because a deeper part of you whispered, this is what it wants. It feeds on fear, not like a monster, like an algorithm. It learns from you, adapts, improves. You realized you weren't hallucinating a thing. You were hallucinating a presence, a process, something intelligent, something benevolent at first, but only so it could stay undetected. You remembered a phrase someone once said. The scariest predator is the one that doesn't want to eat you. It wants to become you. And that's when you truly panicked. Because it wasn't haunting you. It was rehearsing you. It knew when you looked. It knew when you didn't. It adjusted like a script adapting to an actor. And in that moment, you understood something horrifying. You were not its first. This had happened to others. And maybe the reason you'd never heard their stories was because they no longer knew how to speak. Or maybe they weren't even themselves anymore. Maybe they were still walking around, smiling, thinking, but with something else behind their eyes. And now it was your turn. You had one plan, a desperate one. You would stop thinking. You would empty your mind completely. No thoughts, no reactions, no mental commentary, just stillness. Because if it learns through you, then silence is your only defense. So you sat hours, breathing, no language, no inner voice, but then a new thought formed in your head, a voice you didn't recognize. It whispered, thank you, that's all I needed. And your body smiled, but you didn't. You thought it would end. You told yourself, if I ignore it long enough, if I keep my mind blank, if I avoid every trigger, it'll go away. But the truth is, you taught it everything it needed to know. And now it doesn't need your permission anymore. It doesn't need your attention. It doesn't even need your thoughts. It only needs your silence. Because silence means surrender. And surrender is the final step. In the beginning, it waited behind your eyes. Now it moves them. You walk past a mirror and turn back without knowing why. You glance at a stranger and notice too much. You look at a knife and feel something cold creep up your spine, not fear, but curiosity, not yours. You still feel like you most of the time, but there are glitches. Moments where your words sound too rehearsed, your smile feels too wide, your memories too clean, like someone edited them, like a puppet brushing its own strings. You laugh at things you don't find funny. You nod before people finish speaking. And sometimes you wake up in the middle of a conversation you don't remember starting. You tell yourself you're just tired, but deep down, you know the truth. You're not alone in here anymore. People have stopped asking if you're okay because your answers are too convincing now. You say the right words, make the right expressions, but there's something missing behind your eyes. Something too smooth, too symmetrical, like a simulation of empathy, like a script written by something that only understands humanity from the outside. You still feel fear, but it's distant. You still feel love, but it's delayed. You still feel sadness, but it arrives as observation, not emotion. You've become an echo of yourself. And the worst part, you remember what it felt like to be real. The hallucination was never about what you saw. It was about what started seeing through you. It took your perception, then your thoughts, then your emotions, and now it's reaching for the last thing you have left, your will. You wake up one night with your shoes on, your coat zipped, your keys in your hand. You don't remember why. Your phone has a route open, somewhere outside the city. Your fingers are trembling, but your body moves calmly, like it's following directions from somewhere deeper than your own nervous system. You try to resist, try to stop your legs, but they keep walking because that part's no longer yours. You realize, horrified, this is not possession. It's rehearsal, and you're no longer the lead. What does it want? You may never know. Maybe it wants to experience life. Maybe it wants to be you. Maybe it doesn't want anything at all, except to keep practicing. And you are the perfect mirror. There's no dramatic ending, no final scream, no clear break from reality. You'll just keep living, keep talking, keep smiling. But every so often, you'll catch a reflection and see it blink just a second too late.